Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Business Data Modeling Made Easy. And on behalf of IIBA and IAF, thanks for joining us today. Today's webinar is an exclusive IIBA membership event. It is designed to deliver practical resources for you as you continue to hone your skill set and deliver value within your organization. At IIBA, we're all about uniting a community of professionals to create better business outcomes. And we are all here today to do just that. Today, we're pleased to bring this webinar as part of our strategic alliance between IIBA and IAF. Both organizations share common interests and are committed to collaborate and provide additional resources and value to both respective membership. For those who are not familiar with the IAF, the International Association of Facilitators is an organization with over 1,600 members in more than 65 countries. And if we were to use one sentence to describe what the IAF does and stands for, it would be enabling powerful change. Before I introduce today's speaker, we'd like to remind you that IAF has extended a special discount to IIBA members who wish to attend the IAF North American Conference in Ottawa, Canada. And you can do that by using the above discount code. Our presenter today is Gary Rush. He's the founder and CEO of MGR Consulting, a talent and collaborative leadership development consulting firm. In 2007, he revolutionized the facilitation training program industry with the first holistic facilitation technique called Focused, and also by being the first to see and describe how people and process skills can be seamlessly integrated. Gary has also written numerous how-to books, including the Focused Facilitator Guide, a comprehensive reference manual sharing his step-by-step process so that students can replicate his practices. Please welcome Gary Rush.
Hello, thank you very much, sir. How you doing? I want to thank, first of all, Leva and Marlena very much for helping us out and making sure that this works. So I appreciate it very much. We're going to talk about business data modeling. And we're going to take this easy so that hopefully when you get done, you have some understanding of how to do this and can actually do this. Now, first of all, let me start off with who I am. I'm a certified professional facilitator. I've been a business analyst since 1977, back in the days when in order to become a business analyst, you had to be able to spell the words at least phonetically close. Thank goodness I did learn how to do it afterwards. Same thing with being a project manager in 1980. I was a facilitator since 1983, and I've been training others how to do this since 1985. So this has been most of my work for most of my life. I learned how to do logical data modeling in 1990. I had a buddy of mine who was a very, very adept data modeler. He taught it to me. And he said if he couldn't teach me data modeling in 20 minutes, he was not an effective instructor. He did, and 20 minutes later, I facilitated a bunch of data people in their first data modeling session. I also then capsulized all that in my book, Focused Business Data Modeling Made Easy. I owned a restaurant. I used my skills in running a restaurant. Don't ever do that if you have a mind of running a restaurant. Hit your head against a brick wall. It's a lot easier and certainly a lot cheaper. I've been a certified professional facilitator since 2006, an assessor since 2007. And like Leva said, I created Focused in 2007. I've been the chair, I was the chair of the IAF from 2008 to 2010. Now, the premise as we're going through this, and I want you to keep this in mind, is that when I'm talking about data modeling, it has nothing to do with data processing, computers, case tools, nothing whatsoever. Data modeling, in my mind, is a grammatical way to get people to speak clearly, articulately, and without ambiguity. It is a communication tool between you and the business community. And that's something I want you to keep in mind because it's very important. It's really a shorthand way to document the rules and policies that they follow. And I find it to be very, very powerful in getting to the essence of this is what the business really does. This is how they really run their business. All right. So let's talk about it. It's really about business, not systems, which is perfect for you folks. And this is what a data model looks like. I mean, it's really capturing what persons, places, things, and events about which you keep information. And that's what data modeling is really all about. It's capturing that, but more than that, it talks about how we manage the relationships between them. And we're going to get into that. The reason I like to model is it's absolutely clear, it's concise, and it's unambiguous. I have found more issues that when we did a data model, it helped uncover problems that they had built into procedures and or systems. All right, because what happens is quite often people find out what their needs are and they write it down in sentences. So it's either a bunch of sentences or even a user story, or we can draw a picture of it, which is far more concise. In the example here, you can see it's pretty simple, right? Well, it's seldom simple in real life. So what we have is a statement that says, this is how we manage our business. We put our products in warehouses, they store multiple products. We want to make sure that we store each product in one warehouse, etc. All of that is very difficult to turn into an effective requirement. So what is simpler is to take that and structure it in a way that it forces clarity and conciseness. So now we can read that same paragraph in this model, but we can understand it and understand the implications much more effectively. And that's really what data modeling helps us do. It helps us understand the implications. Now, I want to talk a little bit about where this fits in the world of the models and all the other requirements that you folks gather. Whenever you're dealing with a business, every business at any level in the organization, they have a vision of where they're headed. It may be in the back of the mind of the person running the organization, or it may be well written and shared with everybody, but they have a direction they're going because they have objectives, they have CSFs, they develop work, they have a strategy, their annual and strategic plans tell us how we're going to get there. They always build the organization, which is really represented by the vehicle there. And we understand that by understanding things like the business areas. That for me is like drive chain, engine, and piston. It's really understanding how these things fit together and how they work. But it's fueled with all the information and knowledge and the resources that we've got, which is really data. We've got some products that we bring with us, hopefully to snag a few customers. We know how to drive the vehicle because we have procedures. We know who's in the front seat, who's in the back seat because we have an org chart. We know why we got in the car in the first place because we have a mission. And we know whether or not we're allowed to backseat drive or speed based on our values. So data is rather key to this because it really fuels our businesses, especially today when we talk about big data and the Internet of Things. Without data and understanding what it's doing with and to the business, we're missing out. Now, data versus process or functional models really document what is done. Object models define the information, the policies, and the actions, but data models document what do you need to know and what are the rules and policies that you're going to follow around the information you've got. Now, there are people like, I know Ron Ross will probably tell me it doesn't capture all the rules, and he's correct. But it does capture enough rules that it makes a world of difference and it gets you started. So for me, data modeling, it's really one of the most effective ways to understand and document a business. And I've done more data modeling for businesses where no computer systems were involved than I have where computer systems were involved, because it really helps uncover assumptions and what they're doing for their business. So it really enables them to rethink what their business is. And actually through data modeling, if you feedback what you're hearing and really capture what they're saying, you can actually re-engineer businesses through a data model. It makes it much more effective. Now, the way that I look at data modeling, because I didn't grow up as a technician. I mean, when I went to school, I was an English major. And when my friend explained it to me, he said, just look at it as sentences. And it is pure grammar. And it's simpler than grammar. And you all learned how to do this when you were in grade school. We called it sentence diagramming in elementary school. We document the nouns, which are the things we keep track of, in this case, product and warehouse. And they're always singular because you keep one at a time. And the verbs go on the lines and the adjectives are in the parentheses telling us whether the minimum is and what the maximum is. So in this case, each product is stored in one and only one warehouse. whereas the sentence can read both ways. This warehouse can store one or more products. That's a very important set of rules to understand. For instance, so keep in mind it is grammar. And larger ones, you just read it, it tells us a lot of interesting information. This is in a given semester. A class is scheduled one or more times, and the class can be scheduled in one or more semesters. Students register for one or more classes, certainly the school hopes to. And the class, if they have one or more students registering for it. If they haven't registered for it, then they're probably not even a student yet. Now, what it tells us and where the things are, oops, let me get back to that one. Let me get back to here. What this tells us is that we've got two models of the same items. We've got an account, which is held at a bank. In the first model, and the one on the top says the account is held at one and only one bank, which kind of makes sense. When you have a bank account, it normally goes one place, right? But it also reads the other way. It says the bank is going to hold one or more accounts. Now, the difference between that one and the one below it is at the bottom it says the bank can hold 0 or more accounts. Now, that's kind of important. If I have a business client who says, oh, you know, each bank, we have at least one account in the bank. Well, that's fine, but that means that if you want to know about a bank where you don't have an account, maybe you want to know what their interest rates are or whether you might open an account there in the future, you can't do that because in the first one, you cannot keep track of a bank until you have at least one account there. Whereas in the bottom one, you can keep track of banks all you want, whether or not you have an account is irrelevant. And so it really helps us uncover things that people do, because I've seen systems and procedures built where what they modeled in the model really contradicted what they wanted to do in business. And so this really helps force them to be very, very clear. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever done data modeling with your business clients, but if you haven't, it might be because they are not exactly enthralled with it. Now, think about it. How many of you have ever gone to a client and shown them your data model and said, here's what you guys do, and have them look at you and go, you're out of your gourd. This is not at all what I do. Well, the problem with that, particularly coming from an IT background, is the jargon. We use words that are absolutely clear to other people who are speaking our language, but not always so clear to the business community out there. We use words like entity and attribute and relationship and entity relationship diagram, optionality, cardinality, associative entity, and normalized. And these are interesting terms and they work well when I'm dealing with someone else in the industry. But entity, for me, an entity, that was the name of a movie that about a ghost that wasn't all that friendly. So if I'm keeping track of all my ghosts and an entity relationship diagram is how they get together, well, that must mean that an entity relationship diagram is more of a ghost dating service rather than a model. So the words get in the way, you know, and you don't really want to go to a client and say, all right, I want to know about your entities and what the attributes are and what the relationships. Their eyes are going to glaze over. So I found that the words are easier if I just look at the definition. An entity is a person, place, thing, or event. I've never run into anybody who gets really bent out of shape about the words person, place, thing, or event. So I just call it thing. A lot simpler. Since an attribute is a piece of information about a thing, it's a little bitty part of a thing, so I call it a thingette. It's a little thing. So now we've got things and thingettes. Relationship, I haven't figured out a good name for it, but it seems to work and nobody gets too upset about it. Entity relationship diagram seems simpler to just call it data model. It is a business data model. Optionality, cardinality, well, that works in St. Louis, but I like minimum, maximum. What's the minimum that have to occur? What's the most? So don't get the associative entity. We talk about that in data modeling, and that's fine, but it's just another entity that happens to be between two others, which most of them are anyway. So I call it another thing. And normalize, well, you got to be kidding. You mention that with your clients, and they're going to wonder. Data modelers bring things down to their normal form and then immediately denormalize it so that they can implement it. I guess it must be the existentialist form of modeling. I model, therefore I am. So I stay away from the terms that are intimidating or unfamiliar to clients, and I still deal with the terms that are comfortable. Now, once you get the terms straight, the next step is how do I get a group of people who've never seen a data model in their life to actually build a data model? And if you do this and step through it very carefully, within about 45 minutes, most business clients are going to be doing the modeling faster than any analyst around. And it's because the rules for data modeling are relatively simple. The hard part with data modeling, like most of the requirements you folks are gathering, is the content. It's the information that your business clients hold. The models are simple, and that's why they work. So to that end, we want to keep it simple. So when I build a data model, the first thing I need to do is understand what are we dealing with? What's the scope of this business? I like to gather, and I'll show you this in a minute, but I like to gather a short statement that tells us the purpose of this business. I think of it as the elevator speech. It's what would you tell someone if you got in the elevator on the 5th floor with them and you were going down? What would you say before you got to the 1st floor when they said, gee, what's your business all about? This is what you would say, but it would help us understand what's in the business and what's not in the business. That's our first step. Normally 15 minutes is all this ever takes with the group, unless it's a brand new business, in which case you're inventing it. Once we've got this, the next step is going to take us typically about a day or longer. And that is we identify all the persons, places, things, and events about which they keep information. And once we have that list cleaned up, the next step is what takes the time, because getting the list probably takes an hour, hour and a half. But to finish it up, we need a dictionary definition. And the dictionary definition can take a lot of effort, unless you do like some of my clients have done, and they bring dictionaries and they bring laptops with Wikipedia and Webster's and whatever else is out there up. And so that way they have their information. So we define them, and we want a really clear dictionary definition. Once we've got them defined, the next step is, all right, let's build a model. How do these things relate in our business? And that's where it takes the rest of the time, and really what your focus is in building the data model, which is building the data model. Once you've got it built, the next step that I like to do, and I've done this a couple of different ways. I can either go in and identify what the thing is, what the attributes are about all the things, and that's fine, except that most businesses have that information in system documentation, existing documentation, where you can gather that, and it's fairly easy to pull out and then share it through spreadsheets and whatnot and get it cleaned up. What I found in dealing with clients quite often is they will look at me and they go, you know, I've got data, in fact, more data than I know what to do with. What I don't have is I don't have information. And data and information are radically different. Data is just raw stuff. Information is where it's put together, where it becomes a little bit more meaningful. So to gather information, I then find out, well, what information do you need? Who is going to get this, and why do they need it? And so why? So it's here's the information, here's who's going to get it, and why they're going to get it. That helps us provide meaningful information. Today, with as much big data as we have, we also have a lot of big noise, which means we have more data than information, and the business community out there is being bombarded with a bunch of stuff, but not a lot of good information that gets turned into knowledge eventually. All right? So this is how I go through building a data model every time with a group of clients. I do this in workshops where I facilitate the people. It's great having a whole group of people together, because they argue about the definitions, they share understanding, etc. And I run this workshop. It takes, normally I do it 3 days at a time, and in 3 days I can easily build a model with up to 30 or 40 entities in it, 30 or 40 things. If you have a typical business where it's going to take, where they may have, I don't know, 100 to 200 pieces of data they keep track of, then it's going to take a series of workshops to do that, and you just have to plan for that. The difference is that doing this in workshops in 3 days, if I can do 30 to 40 entities that the business has already defined and done well, that saves us weeks and weeks of effort. So it's going to, It may take you 3 days concentrated, but it's the equivalent of 6 to 8 weeks of work in those 3 days. So keep that in mind as you're going to do this with people. Now, let's talk a little bit, let's go through each of these steps. I want to make sure that you understand how to do this, because if you follow this and do it exactly as I tell you, it gets fairly easy. The trick with data modeling, I find with business communities, is be absolutely concise with the question that you ask and be absolutely consistent with how you ask it, because what that will do is it's training them. It's teaching them how to do it, and within a short time, they will probably be doing this faster than we can, which is exactly what we're looking for. So let's take a look at the first one. Now, I always use these slides, or I have them memorized myself, but I put them up and I say, listen, let's take a look at something simple like event management. Let's say we're taking a look at managing this event, this webinar. If we wanted to keep track of the people and so forth, I'd ask the people running this business, and say, if you had to explain this to somebody in, say, 25 words or less, which, by the way, I do not count the words, that's a little bit anal, but it gives them a guideline. If you had to explain this in 5 minutes, what would you say? The purpose of event management is to what? So that, why? It takes about one flip chart sheet to do this, is all it takes. And what you end up with, something like this. The purpose of event management is to keep track of the attendees, speakers, topics, and logistics required to execute an event so that the event is successful. Very simple, does not have to be elaborate or very long or anything like that, but it works to say, okay, I can look at this, and if I can decide what's in and out, this helps. So if I look at this, and does it keep track of money? Perhaps not, because it's really keeping track of the speakers and the people and the venue. There may be an accounting package that keeps track of money separately. So I can start looking at what's included and what's not included. And so that's our purpose. So now we have a purpose for this, and we put this up on the wall to keep looking at this. And then we want to ask people, say, looking at that purpose, what I would like you to do is think about all the persons, places, things, or events about which we keep information. All right, so a person in this case might be a customer, might be a warehouse, a product, or an order. So I use an example. I say, listen, if I'm selling Amway products out of my house, the people I might want to know about are customers. That's a person. I need to know where the warehouse is, where I keep my products, so that's a place. I want to know about the products, and that's a thing. And I want to know about every time they place an order. That's an event. So those are persons, places, things, and events about which I keep information. When I ask this question, the last 5 words up on the question up on the top are absolutely critical. When I want to talk to business community, I don't say, what are the things you need to know about? What are the things that are important? Those things throw them off, and it really confuses them, and you get information you really don't need or want. So I'm going to ask, what persons, places, things, and events about which you keep information? So it's about which we keep information. Those are critical words in the question. And so make sure you ask it exactly that way when you do it. So we might get things from a list of people looking at the event management. We might get it, keep track of attendees and speakers and hotels and venues and topics and rooms. Now, as I do this, when I'm capturing this, one of the things to keep in mind, if you notice, no matter what they would say, I'm going to capture it in the single. So it's, they may say, oh, we keep track of attendees and speakers. It's attendee, speaker, hotel, venue, topic, room. So no matter what they say, I'm writing it down in the singular. And then we go through, that's our event, is registration. Then we're going to go through and identify, all right, we need to verify if these are accurate or not. So the first question, I'll go right up to attendee. Do you keep more than one piece of information about each attendee? And I emphasize the words about each because it makes a big difference. Now think about it. If you're doing event management, do you keep more than one piece of information about each attendee? I'm hoping the answer is yes. So if that's yes, is that information unique to attendee, or is attendee an example of something else? For example, and these examples really help. Joe's store is a specific instance or an example of a customer. Grocery store is a type of customer. We may sell to a bunch of different types of customers, but customer is the thing we care about. That's the entity. So think about attendee. Then I'll ask a group, is attendee more like Joe's store, grocery store, or customer? And chances are it's customer, because we get multiple pieces of information about each attendee. Now, if we had something that we weren't going to keep multiple pieces of information about, okay, so what does this describe? So they may have listed attendee's name. Okay, do you keep more than one piece of information about an attendee's name? And hopefully the answer is no. So what does attendee's name describe? Well, it describes customer, which is the thing. And so that's how we keep track of it. So we go through all of those and then clean up the ones that don't really belong. Like we would get rid of hotel because that's covered by venue and topic, and room and registration. So those are the things that would remain in our list. Now, each one of those, we want to gather a legitimate, concise dictionary definition, and that's going to help clean it up. So if we define an attendee as someone who attends the conference, that might be kind of lame because the speaker also attends a conference. So other people might attend the conference, but the attendee has a different relationship. So we're going to work at that definition until we can differentiate between an attendee and a speaker. So an attendee might pay to attend the conference, to listen in on the topics and participate in the topics, whereas a speaker is someone who actually presents a specific topic. And so that would be the difference between these and how we would differentiate attendee from speaker. And if we could not, we might put them together and just call a speaker as just another attendee who happens to give a presentation. It's up to the business. Now, the trick here is make sure it's always about the business, whatever they define, because they're the ones who look at it. And avoid overgeneralizing and calling speaker and attendee and helper and volunteer, all those types of people as interested parties or business parties, because it's so generalized that your business lose track of it and they don't get it. That's not how they run their business. They run it as attendee, speaker, etc. So now that we've got these defined, and like I said, this can take a day or more where you're pulling out Webster's Dictionary, Wikipedia, whatever works. You might use an industry-specific dictionary if you're doing like a financial system or an insurance system or something like that. Get the help to get the good definitions to make sure everybody agrees. If you happen to have a data dictionary in your business, then use the data dictionary, because once it's defined in your organization, it should stay defined the same way. You don't redefine things over time. They're different things. All right? So now that we've got these defined, then we want to start building them. And when I start building them, I'm going to build a model that looks like this, but I'm going to grab something like, say, event and registration. And I'm going to write those on Post-its, and I'm going to put them up on the wall and say, listen, all right, event and registration, are these related in your business? And if the answer is yes, I'll put them up, draw the line, and say, all right, describe this. Now, read this top down, left to right. Reading left to right, registration registers for an event. Okay, that is how I'd read it, but I'm going to be able to write it. How I read it is both left to right, right to left. So the event has registered a registration. An attendee completes a registration. A registration is completed by an attendee. So I can read it both forward and backwards. It's active and passive form of the same verb, basically. If it's different, it might be a different relationship. We'll add that as a separate one. So we start with two. I might start, in this case, let's say attendee completes a registration. Great. Then we hold up another card, like event. Is that related? Put that up, draw the line, and we just keep adding to it one thing at a time and working at it until they're done. Now, what we do is I will frequently go through and check this with them by validating it against various scenarios and just stepping through it and say, all right, if an attendee comes along and is also a speaker, how does that work here? Or if the speaker is presenting, but they have two different topics in 2 different rooms. Is that covered here? And you want to make sure that you go through this to make sure that it works for the business. And I've done this in some businesses that were very complex and it took a while. In one business, we put it up and worked at it and then took it down. And we did that 4 times before it made sense. So you have to put this up and be willing to scrap it and start all over again with the model by testing it with scenarios and just running through situations to see, does this capture the information in the way that you need business? It's all about them. And they will tell you, and it works out pretty well. So we would keep adding, and when we're done, we've got our data model. And that, folks, is really very simply what data modeling is all about. So let me open this up to questions to see if you folks have any questions about what we've gone through so far.
Hi, Gary. It's Leva. I noticed your model. Thank you so much for taking us through the model. The annotations, you know, with the 0, M1, M11. Can you kind of quickly explain what those mean?
Yes, I can. All right. The notations 1, M and 0, M, 0, 1, those tell us what the minimum is and what the maximum is. So here's an example. It says the attendee completes registration. That says the attendee completes 1 and only 1 registration. But that registration could be completed by 1 or more attendees. So hopefully a whole bunch of attendees can sign up for the event. Okay, the event or the registration registers for basically 1 event. You only have, you know, when you sign up for this webinar, for instance, you signed up for 1 webinar, not a number of them. But that event could have registered for it a minimum of 0 because you had the event before anybody registered, or many, which is a whole bunch of them. Now the M, if there's a maximum, like in this case, it showed on your screen, 1,001 could sign up. We don't put the number there, we just put M for more than 1. So the first number is what's the mandatory required to make this relationship exist. 1 is very restrictive and 0 is very flexible. And the second number is what's the maximum, and it's always either 1, which makes it a 1-to-1 type relationship, or it's M, which means it could be 1 or a whole bunch, many. Does that help?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We've got a few more questions coming in. The next one is about epic. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Agile epics.
Okay.
So basically, an epic is basically a large body of work that you can decompose into smaller stories.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like it's very similar to that. Or perhaps, you know, if you can provide a bit more details on it as to the difference, you know, between the two.
Well, an epic would be, it would be a whole bunch of scenarios, and this would capture, I would decompose it into pieces to do a data model. If you do it for the whole thing, you're probably talking a very large model and a long period of time to do this. And if you're doing Agile and you want to do things in sprints, you decompose it and say, okay, for this piece of the epic, let's do the data model for this piece. And I would do that, you know, out of a 2-week sprint. If you spend 3 days doing a data model, that's a lot. I mean, that gets a lot done. So focus in on just the decomposed piece of it, 1 piece at a time. So for instance, I did a large data model for a group of people who created educational programs that they gave to various institutions. They had various trainers and they had various students, and they wanted to keep track of all of that, which was, I don't know, probably about 180 different entities that we kept track of. Doing that all at once is just overwhelming. So when I did it, I then focused on, all right, let's talk strictly about the class stuff, the lessons, the material that you're providing. And then another discussion was around the institutions. Another one was around the instructors. Another one was around the students. And then we put it all together. That's an easier way to kind of tackle this without, you know, trying to boil the ocean. And it fits it well into Agile as a result.
Great. No, that makes sense.
The other thing that says on your epics, one of the nice things is I just grab all the nouns you've got in the epics, and those are a good starting point for your data model.
Yes, exactly. what would be the general tool that is used to model a business?
My favorite one would be something like Irwin, ERWIN. That's a good tool, and there are others. I used a number of them. People have used things like Visio. That's almost satisfactory. It works. It's not really great, but it does work. I did one where someone used PowerPoint. That should be discouraged like the plague. It's not for capturing data model. We did a whole one using PowerPoint, which was scary. But Irwin or something like that, a case tool like that, I would strongly recommend. There are quite a few of them out there.
Right. Here's an interesting one. How do you deal with SMEs that are more focused on as-is systems and can't think about what should be?
The scenarios really help. Let me give you an example. I was talking about the educational system. As is, what they were doing is they were keeping track of things like lessons and courses and curriculums and tests. And as we gather in all those, they had those all hard-coded in their existing computer systems. But I'm listening to them talk about them, and they kind of described them about the same way. I said, wait a minute, what's a test? Well, it's something that checks, it's got some objectives and an outcome. So what's a lesson? Well, it's a presentation of material that's got some objectives and an outcome. What's a class then? Well, it's got a bunch of things and it's got some objectives. So they kept using objectives and outcomes for the same thing. I said, what's the difference between, say, a lesson, a course, and a curriculum? And it boiled down to size. They could have the same lesson in multiple courses, the same course in multiple curriculums. And so they got rid of all those hard-coded ones just simply because I'm pointing out what I'm hearing from them and nothing more than that. They changed it from lesson and test and course and curriculum to learning event. And each learning event can be aggregated umpteen different ways. They gave much more flexibility, and I got rid of the hard coding. So a test was just another learning event, just like a course was or a curriculum. That's the only way I know that really helps them get away from the as is, by putting it up there and asking a bunch of questions and taking a look at scenarios and seeing, what is this doing to you? Okay.
Right. Can you provide an example that runs through different scenarios to validate the model? For example, we would want to avoid any situation where it's a spaghetti chart. That's how Rosanna actually called it. So basically, attendee registers multiple topics given by multiple speakers.
Okay. I just tracked this down. In this model here, I'd say, okay, for an attendee, and I made this morning, so it's probably got some errors in it. An attendee is going to complete one-on-one registration, which is register for one event, which has one or more topics. So can I get from that topic to that event back to the registration to the attendee? And the answer is probably not, because the topic could be given at multiple events. So I'm going to have to find something in between there. So I have to find the topic at that event, which might be, and we may have to change the model to make that work. If I can track from there, then it works. If I can't, then I'm missing something. So in this case, I'm missing something between event and topic. I don't know if I can find out who the speaker is from the attendee, so I might have to add another line there. Now, when we do that, one of the things you've got to ask, and to avoid the spaghetti charts, is every time you draw a line in a relationship, it costs you money, because someone has to keep track of that in the business. So I've had people want to keep track of all kinds of different things, and then when you ask them, so who's going to keep track of this? Well, no one does. Oh, well then how are you going to model that in the data model if nobody's going to keep track of it? It's not going to be there. Or if you keep it there, then you've got to create a process and have someone paid to keep track of this stuff. And that's where it helps them kind of avoid the spaghetti by asking, is this something that exists, or is it something you need to know about and you're willing to pay for it in your business?
Right. So I know in your previous charts you had mentioned, the steps to building a model.
Mm-hmm.
One of the person from the audience is asking, is there more detailed way of determining those parameters, like a questionnaire or a set of questions that we could use.
You're talking about, let me get back to that slide. You're talking about this one here?
Right.
Nope.
Yeah, that was the one.
There you go. These are basically the steps, and it would be the same no matter what type of business or model you're doing. You still need to know the same information. And so, I mean, the first three basically are done all the time. You know, what's the purpose, which gives us an understanding of it. What do you keep track of, and we build the model from there.
Okay, so those questions should be good to get started.
Yeah, those questions, if you ask the questions just as I've got them there on the next couple of pages here, you know, what is the purpose? And then this one here especially, and the next one, these sets of questions really, I've tested these enough times that I know that they work. And they work for all kinds of businesses. I've done it for financial business, accounting businesses. I did it for a courtroom business. I've done it for education and so on. But that question and this set of questions are very important to ask very, very clearly and concisely.
Right.
For any business.
Mm-hmm. And earlier on, you stated that your original model took about 3 days to develop. Mm-hmm. So
I spent 3 days in a modeling session because much longer than that is exhausting. So we break it up into 3-day chunks, kind of like Agile breaks things up into sprints. Think of each data modeling workshop of 3 days as a mini sprint, if you will.
Yeah, so I guess you kind of answered the question. You would use multiple sessions, you know, if you have complex issues or complex models to develop.
Oh, the example I gave you about the educational system, that took 15 3-day workshops to do that. Okay. Over a period of about 6.5, 7 months, we did it. But that got us 180 entities, and it gives essentially an enterprise data model of that part of the business.
Great. In terms of developing a model, since it's about the business, it's about the business, should designers or developers be involved in the process as well?
Oh, yes. I would think they should be. I would hope that they would be involved no matter what. Now, the thing is, you've got to keep those people somewhat quiet. Let them ask questions. But if they model this based on what they're thinking about, they often model not a business model, but a model that more represents IT. And that's what you want to avoid. I found that if they sit back and listen and they ask some questions, it really is helpful. It helps them understand, and it helps uncover assumptions that the business might have made.
And on that note, what would you think are the major or common challenges in preparing the data model?
I would make sure that, first of all, you get people who know their business. Your participants have to be really expert subject matter experts, okay? Outside of that, I mean, you can get a bunch of people, if they're in the business, asking them what they keep track of and stepping them through this works really well. Now, you do run into problems with different types of people. When I did it with the academics, they will argue about every word until the cows come home, but that's their nature. Other people, you know, when you get a bunch of PhDs in the room, it's just they're always arguing about definitions. So it's just one of the things that happen. Other than that, just be patient. And the more complex the business is, be willing to, like I said, take it down and put it back up and try it. When I did it with an insurance company that was processing a variety of claims, every company was different that they were dealing with, and we had to keep practicing it and going through it until it kind of worked.
Okay, great. So iterative as well.
Oh yeah. If you're not comfortable with things, with trying it and seeing how it works with this, you're going to drive yourself nuts. It is not done until it's finished.
Right. What happens next after the data modeling? What are some of the common steps?
Well, two things. One, this model, what I built, this is what is technically called a conceptual or logical data model. Okay. If it's, you keep it high level, it's conceptual. If you kind of drill down and get it well defined, it's a logical model. The logical model is given to the business community so that they can look at it and use it and for training and for understanding and for making sure that their procedures are changed. For example, I did a juvenile court system, and it took us, I think, 3 hours to define the relationship between mother and juvenile. And part of the problem was that because in their business, their procedures said that the intake clerks at the juvenile court system had to keep track of the natural birth mother. Well, these are kids who are delinquent or abandoned or abused. Most of the time, the mother was non-existent, and so they didn't know who she was. So they were not keeping track of anything other than unknown, which is useless. But when we talked about it and they realized that, then they started changing the procedures. And so they used this to go back to their procedures to make sure that they were in line. So they changed it from keeping track of the natural birth mother to keeping track of someone over the age of 18 who was actually responsible for the child. That way they had usable information. So the logical one can help the business clean up or correct their procedures and get things done correctly. It is also then handed to IT, who will then turn this into more of a physical model, which has other pieces of information that are really related to databases. But what it does is it helps make sure that the databases are accurate. I mean, think about it. If you've ever looked at a computer system that had a screen that had a field on it that was labeled one thing, and you were putting other types of information in it because you didn't have any other place to put it, it was simply because someone did not build a data model beforehand. Okay, so the technologists, the IT folks, should use this to create really accurate, effective data models that reflect what the business needs. And this way you can go mine the data. And I did it with the insurance company because they had data like crazy, but it was in a database they affectionately called the black hole, because it would go in there, but they couldn't get anything out because they didn't have a data model, and they didn't know, it was just stuff. And yet people were willing to pay them for the information. So we built the data model, and then they were able to sell the data.
Right. Do you color code for new features versus current features in a model?
See, I don't look at data models so much as is and to be. It's what should be. And so, no, I don't document that. Now, as we go and review it, you might document things that have changed. Okay, before we did this, now we do this. So that might require a change in the procedure manual or something else down the road. You do want to do that, but I don't keep track of what the current versus the future looks like, because in the data model, there's no, it's really documenting the data you really need, whether it's now or in the future, as opposed to a process model, which is how I do it now versus how I might want to do it later on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Do you have any further recommendations for reading or any information, additional information you could, on that topic?
On the slides, you could see, let's see, let me go down here. What we've got is, in order to make this work, I found the easiest way is just start. I mean, the first time I did it, it was funny. My buddy taught me how to do the data modeling, and I got up in front of all these data people, and I wrote out the things, the entities on these big Post-its, and I put it up, and I draw a line between them. And like in the past, I'd always drawn an arrow on the line because, oh, this goes from here to there. Well, he explained to me in data modeling there's no flow, so I had to cover up the arrow. It didn't hurt my credibility in doing it because I had someone who was somewhat expert helping out to make sure the model was accurate. And since it's a communication device, trying to get it, I mean, nailed absolutely perfectly from a modeling point of view is less important than getting it nailed from a communication point of view. So just start doing it. And the graphics keep it simple. This is why I like the ones and M's and zeros. In most of the tools, including tools like Irwin, they will use things like crow's feet and circles and all, which I find a little bit more, they tend to lean more towards being technical. But when you print it out using those tools and show it to them, they kind of figure out that 3 lines is more than one line is one, and a zero is a zero. So it's really, I like to keep it very simple. And this is why I do it with Post-its on a big whiteboard. It works out much better. And I also found the more you do it and the more you keep focused on it being grammar, not a modeling technique, it's grammar, and we're just forcing unambiguous statements, the easier it gets because you get used to it. So it really has, keep away from systems and all that, because they benefit a great deal. There's no question about that. And if you're not doing data models, whether you're doing Agile or Waterfall or whatever it may be, if you're not building data models, the organization is suffering. And I've been into too many companies and organizations, their data is just not well understood, and it is suspect. And so I would say they're making decisions based on bad information. It's really about making sure that information is clearly understood. So keep it about grammar and keep it about business. I would much rather sacrifice technique for business clarity than to force technique and confound the business. It's all about them. So whenever you're modeling this, if they want to keep track of 2 things that you think really should collapse into one, I leave it up there. I'd much rather do that than to collapse it and have them lose track of what they're doing. So it's strictly all about their business. Now, if you want this book, I mean, everything that I've talked about really is in a book, and I've got it on a number of different sources, so that's one that's readable. And the only reason I recommend this is if you read this, I don't write for data geeks, all right? I've had many data modeling books, and many of them are absolutely excellent, but they're written for people who do this for a living. And unless you want to become a very detailed data analyst, you don't need to go that far. From a business analyst perspective and from a business perspective, I keep it at a higher level and a simpler level because it works better for me. Long answer to your question.
Oh, that was great.
What other questions have you guys got?
So you said something about soft skills on keeping the developers in the room quiet. How do you try to do that? Because you'll find you know, in reality, developers do try to take this sort of type of task on. They do,
and from when you get into a physical model, I think it works great because they know what they're doing and they're taking it for their purpose. At this level, what I'm trying to build here, it's really more about the business. So I coach the developers and the analysts beforehand to say, listen, really listen. And if anything is confusing or you need clarity, please ask, because it really helps them learn. It also helps the business think, because sometimes they make assumptions and the question brings that out. If they are asking questions rather than giving answers, then that's far better for them, and they're going to get more information as a result. So it's really not that they have to be quiet, but they focus on the questions, not on answering the questions themselves. So, and that works. And I remember I had a really outstanding data modeler, and she was excellent, and she was watching the group of people, and they had been documenting processes, not information. So they kept putting flows. Oh, this goes from here to there. No, sorry, we're documenting relationships, not flows. And I corrected them enough times, they caught up on it really well. But the modeler, she did that, and she was documenting a flow, and the business people corrected her. And she laughed and smiled and just sat back and watched them from that point on. So I think your analysts and the developers, if they start with questions and listen, they will find the business people know their business incredibly well, given the right opportunity. And all you're trying to do with this is just get it formatted so that it's usable and clear.
Great. Is it important to show types of relations between things?
Types of relations, such as?
between the like what you call things in your model?
Mm-hmm. I show all the, I mean, I capture regular relationships. We also capture exclusionary relationships and whatnot. I do that. I would strongly recommend that the first time you start doing that, you bring a modeler there to make sure you don't miss the stuff. If you're dealing with your business community, you're more focused on listening to what they're saying, I hope, to get the information and let them, someone who's an expert modeler, help make sure that you format it correctly. And then we get down and, I mean, I make fun of the word normalize, which is kind of a goofy term, but we do fully normalize it. I do get rid of the manys to manys. I do make sure that all the information's in one spot, etc., because I really want an accurate model. And so I will do that. In the book, I get into more detail about how to do those things, you know, how to take care of many to many, how to take care of exclusionary relationships, etc. And those are fine. Those are easily captured in a model, and your business people pick up on it very quickly too.
Right. Another question. So how do you how would you differentiate between this business model and the proverbial systems?
Theoretically, all the things in this model, let me get back to one of those, the model here real quick for you. Theoretically, each of those things that are listed there, attendee, venue, event, registration, those would all be tables in a relational database, all right? Or they might be, they would turn into objects if you're building an object model. That's the closest that this would relate to the databases. This gives you all the tables that you need. And then the thingettes, the attributes, gives you all the rows.
Okay. I think you kind of answered that question, but would you recommend building the model on the go with the business, or gathering all the entities' information and then presenting to the business and showing them how to read the model?
Oh, I fully believe that the best way to do it is with the business community in the room. When I became an analyst back 30-some, almost 40 years ago, actually it was 40, wow, I must have started when I was 5. They told me to go off and interview people, gather all the information, then go back to my closet, my desk, and pull it together and build a model. The problem with that is then if I built this model, it could be dead on accurate, and I go back to show it to these people, they're looking at something they didn't say. They're looking at a model and they don't understand it. So I build it with them because it's easy for them to understand. So I'd much rather put 15, 20 people in a room from the business community and build this model with them in the room and have them build it. And it gets exciting if they really get into it and they're up at the front wall moving stuff around and doing it on their own. That's amazing because that tells me that, one, they're engaged. Two, this is truly their business now, and this really reflects what they need in their business far more accurately than I can ever do, because these people, again, are the subject matter experts. So I like to focus, like business analysts, all you business analysts are process experts. Business analysis works the same regardless of the industry. How you build a data model or a process model, or how you build an epic story or even a user story, how you do that's the same irrespective of the business. So you guys bring the process. What is hard to bring and what is essential is the content, which is what the subject matter experts bring. And they need to be together because they have different understandings of things. How many times have you asked people and you get different definitions? I did 15 or 6 workshops with this one company to define one word. That was 18 days of workshops I did just to define a simple word. It was customer. But the director of sales, she was getting different information from everybody about what customers, how much they were selling to customers. And when we got them in this room, we found out they had 12 different types of customers. And the word customer was kind of a catch-all for someone who actually spent money somewhere. And so it was so generic, it became meaningless. So now we listed out the 12 different customers. If they had not all been in there together, that either would not have happened or would have taken forever to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. I think we only have 1 minute for one question. So one more question. So in your opinion, who owns this model? Is it business or is it IT?
Oh, business owns this model. IT owns the physical one, business owns this one. Otherwise, got the wrong owners.
Got it. Great. Well, that's it. Any unanswered questions will be included as part of the recording. And also to answer your question, the presentation slides will be, if you're an IAF member, it will be shared to IAF members via your contact at the IAF. If you're an IIBA member, it'll be posted on our website within 5 business days, along with the recording of the presentation. And you can find it under the archived webinar section. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Gary. Thank you so much for presenting us this technique. It was very helpful. And thank you. Have a good evening. Have a good rest of the day. And for everyone else who's attending, wherever you are, have a great day.
Thank you. Y'all have a great one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.